lonely human accepted a deaf girl as housekeeper to repay her drunk father. Then he realized Evan lived alone at the far edge of the city, where the lights were weak and the air felt tired. The city floated in space, built by many kinds of beings, but humans were rare now. Most humans lived quietly and kept their heads down. Evan did the same. He worked repairing old machines for the Port Authority and came home to a small metal house that hummed at night like it was breathing. He did not talk to his neighbors. He did not invite anyone inside. His walls were bare and his rooms smelled of oil and cold metal. At night, he often sat in the dark, watching the stars through a cracked window. He remembered voices that were gone. He remembered laughter that did not come back. The war had taken his family. No one spoke of that war now. Other species said humans caused it. Humans said nothing at all. One night, as Evan was closing his door, a loud knock echoed through the hall. He froze. No one ever came to see him. When he opened the door, 2 security officers stood there. Between them was a middle-aged alien man with gray skin and shaking hands. The man smelled strongly of alcohol. His eyes were wet, and his legs could barely hold him. Evan knew him. The man's name was Rock. Long ago, during the war years, Rock had helped Evan hide from a patrol. He had taken a risk, even though helping a human was dangerous. Evan never forgot that. Rock fell to his knees and bowed his head low. His voice was thick and broken. "I owe you," Rock said. "I owe you everything. Please, take my daughter." Evan stiffened. "What?" Rock lifted his head. His eyes were full of fear. "She is good. She is quiet. She will work hard. I will pay later. I swear it." One of the officers sighed. "This man has unpaid fines. His daughter caused no crime, but he insists this is the only way." Evan looked past them. In the hallway, a young girl stood silently. She was small and thin, with dark hair tied back simply. Her eyes were calm, almost too calm. She did not look afraid. She did not look angry. She only watched. The girl did not speak. "She is deaf," Rock said quickly. "Since she was a child, she will not cause trouble." Evan felt something heavy press against his chest. He did not want this. He had built his life to be empty, because empty was safe. "I don't need a housekeeper," Evan said. Rock lowered his head again. "Then let me sleep in the street." The officers looked away. They did not care. Evan closed his eyes. He remembered the alley years ago. He remembered a gray hand pulling him into the shadows while Boots marched past. "Fine," Evan said quietly. "She can stay. For work, nothing else." Rock cried in relief. He grabbed Evan's hand and pressed it to his forehead. The girl stepped forward. She bowed once, slow and respectful. Then she followed Evan inside without a sound. Rock was taken away soon after. The door closed, and the house felt different at once. The girl stood near the wall, hands folded. Evan realized she had not looked around at all. "I'm Evan," he said, unsure why he bothered. She did not respond. Then she raised her hands and made careful movements. When Evan did not understand, she pointed to her ears and shook her head gently. Then she tapped a small device on her wrist. Words appeared on its screen.
"My name is Lena. Thank you."
Her words were simple. "Clean." Evan nodded. "You can use the spare room." Lena bowed again. That night, Evan could not sleep. He listened to the soft sounds of the house. Once, the lights flickered. He sat up, alert, but the system returned to normal. He told himself it was nothing. In the morning, he found the kitchen clean. Too clean. Old stains were gone. Tools he had lost for months sat neatly on the counter. Lena stood by the sink, drying her hands. "You didn't need to do all that," Evan said. She smiled softly and typed. "I like order." Over the next few days, she worked without being told. She cleaned, sorted, repaired small things. When a heating pipe failed, Evan prepared to fix it himself, but Lena touched it once and stepped back. The pipe sealed on its own. Evan stared. "How did you do that?" She looked confused, then typed, "It was broken. Now it is not." At work, Evan began receiving warnings. Power readings near his home were irregular. Security drones passed by more often. He tried to ignore it. One evening, as Lena prepared food, the lights went out again. This time they stayed out. Emergency systems should have turned on. They did not. Evan reached for a tool, but Lena was already moving. She stood still in the dark, eyes closed, head tilted slightly, like she was listening to something no one else could hear. Then the lights came back. Evan's hands shook. "Lena!"
What was that?
She opened her eyes. Her expression was not surprised. It was careful. She typed slowly. "The house is old. It listens if you touch it right." That answer did not make sense. Evan did not press further. Later that night, he woke to a low hum. Not sound, but feeling. Double, double, double. The wall near the old storage room glowed faintly blue. Lena stood in front of it, one hand raised.
"Lena," Evan whispered. She turned.
For the first time, fear crossed her face. The wall responded to her touch. Lines of light formed symbols Evan had not seen since his training days. Human symbols.
"Locked systems. How do you know this?" Evan asked.
Lena stepped back. Her device flickered, then went dark. She shook her head quickly and backed away, palms open, like she was surrendering. Evan looked at the wall, his heart pounding. That system should not exist. It was erased after the war. Outside, a drone passed slowly, its red eye scanning. Lena pulled Evan away from the wall and pointed to the window. She made a cutting motion across her throat. Danger. Evan understood that much. As the drone moved on, the wall dimmed. The house fell silent again. Evan sat down heavily. His lonely life had cracked open in ways he did not understand. He looked at the girl who had come to repay a debt, and for the first time he wondered if she had chosen him, not the other way around. Evan woke the next morning to the soft hum of the house. The walls were quiet now, but his mind raced. He watched Lena move through the rooms, her hands careful on every surface, her eyes calm. She carried herself as if she knew the house better than he did. Evan still could not understand how a girl so small could have such presence. He decided to test her. He left a broken heater in the living room and went to work on the front entrance lock himself. When he returned, the heater was fixed, its heat flowing steady and even. Evan stared at it, then at Lena, who was standing silently near the kitchen counter, her hands folded neatly. "How did you know how to fix it?" he asked. Lena looked at him, then tapped her device. Words appeared. "I watch. I learn." Evan blinked. That was all. No explanation, simple words. And yet, they made more sense than a long speech ever could. Days passed like this. Lena cleaned, repaired, and organized. She learned the schedules of delivery drones, the patterns of power surges, and even which neighbors were watching. Evan began to realize that she understood things he did not, things he thought were random. She could sense machines, not with her ears, but in a way he could not explain. One evening, as the city lights shimmered through his window, a soft knock came at the door. Evan opened it to find a tall, thin alien officer standing there. Her skin was pale blue, and her eyes were sharp and curious. She introduced herself as Kale. "Evan," Kale said, her voice calm. "We are monitoring energy readings near your location. Some readings are unusual." She looked past him at the quiet, small figure in the corner. "Is she with you?" Evan hesitated. He did not want to draw attention, but he could not hide Lena. He nodded. "She is. Special," Evan said. Kale studied Lena for a long moment. "I see," she said finally. "Be careful. There are people who will notice what she can do." Evan closed the door, feeling the weight of her words. Lena typed silently. "Danger." Evan frowned. He wanted to ask more, but he did not know what. Ah. She was quiet, yet her presence spoke volumes. Later that night, Evan was repairing an old communication panel. Lena watched, then stepped forward. Her fingers hovered over the panel, and the broken wires aligned themselves as if moved by an invisible hand. Sparks danced, and the panel came alive. Evan stepped back, mouth open.
You are amazing, he whispered. Lena typed.
"I help." Evan realized something unsettling. Lena did not just work, she understood. She could fix things no human had worked on in decades, and she was learning, always learning. He started noticing small things about her he had not before. She watched the walls when she moved. Sometimes she would pause in a room and tilt her head slightly, her eyes closed, as if listening to something invisible. Machines seemed to respond to her presence. The old lights, the failing circuits, even the security alarms, they all behaved differently when she was near. One night, the city outside was quiet. The hum of distant engines faded, leaving only the soft vibration of Evan's house. Lena stood near the window, hands resting lightly on the glass. She did not speak, but Evan felt her tension. He moved closer. "What is it?" he asked. She typed slowly, her fingers trembling slightly. Outside, watching, Evan's heart raced. He looked out. A patrol drone moved along the streets, its red eye scanning slowly. It paused near his house, then continued. Lena's body relaxed slightly. Evan realized she could sense it before he even saw it. "Can you feel them?" he asked quietly. She nodded, then tapped her device. Not sound, feeling. Evan shivered. Machines and energy, moving through the world in ways humans could not detect. She felt it all. In the days that followed, Evan tried to communicate better. He learned her signs, simple motions that conveyed thought. It was slow, frustrating work, but it brought him closer. He saw the patience in Lena, the careful way she watched him learn. He realized she was teaching him as much as he was teaching her. One morning he found an old storage room that had always been locked. The lock was ancient, sealed with codes he could not remember. Lena approached it and placed her hand on the door. The lock clicked open, and the door swung wide. Evan froze. "How?" he began. She looked at him, eyes calm. She typed, "Old things remember me." Inside, the room was full of machinery, old computers and storage units with labels in a language Evan had not seen in years. Systems hummed softly, as if waking after a long sleep. Evan realized then that Lena was more than a housekeeper. She was connected to things he had thought were gone forever, things that humans had left behind, things that even aliens claimed did not exist. That night, as he lay in bed, Evan thought about the man who had brought her here. Rock had been drunk, pleading, desperate, but Lena was not here for him. She was here for something greater, something Evan did not yet understand. He heard a soft noise in the hallway and opened his door. Lena was standing there looking at a glowing panel on the wall. Her hand hovered over it, and the panel shifted in response. Light moved like water, forming shapes that seemed almost alive. Evan felt a chill. "Lena, what is that?" she typed. "It should not be here." The words made his stomach tighten. Things that should not exist were responding to her. Things that were meant to be forgotten were alive again. The next morning, Evan began to notice subtle changes. Objects in the house were arranged differently. Machines hummed without power. Lights flickered and settled into patterns he had not seen before. Lena moved through it all silently, her presence steady, as if she belonged more to the house than he did. Neighbors began to glance at the house differently. A few curious children peered over the fence, but they did not come close. Evan realized Lena's presence was noticed, even if she did not try to be seen. One evening, Evan returned from work to find Lena standing by the old communication panel. It was alive, sending signals he could not read. He approached cautiously. "She is touching things that are old," he thought. "Things humans made but forgot." He watched her for a long time. Her hands moved lightly, and the devices obeyed. It was almost magical. And then he noticed something else. Small lines, symbols, faint markings along her wrists and arms, hidden under her sleeves. Symbols that made his heart stop. He asked gently, "Lena, what are these?" She froze. For the first time, Evan saw fear in her eyes. Her hands went to her device, and she erased the words she had written earlier. She typed new words. "Do not ask." Evan did not press. He understood that some things she would not reveal yet. Some things were dangerous. That night, he lay awake, thinking about her, about the quiet girl who fixed machines with a touch, who could feel what others could not, who had unlocked a room that had been sealed for decades. He wondered what she had survived to be here, and what she could do in a world that had forgotten humans. The next morning, the city was unusually quiet. Drones patrolled farther away than usual, their red eyes scanning. Evan noticed it immediately. Something was coming. Something that Lena had felt before he even knew it existed. He went to her. She was in the living room, hands hovering over a console he had never dared touch. The lights in the room flickered and danced in response to her movements. Evan realized she was not just a helper. She was a guardian, a bridge between what humans had lost and what the world still feared. "Lena," he said softly, "what do we do?" She looked at him, eyes calm, and typed, "Wait." Evan understood. They were not ready yet. The city, the neighbors, the machines, they were all waiting too. And as he watched her, he felt the weight of what had come with her, a quiet, strong, impossible power. He had accepted a housekeeper to repay a debt, but now he realized he had accepted something far greater, something that would change everything he knew about being human, about trust, and about the future that waited silently outside his window. The sun began to rise over the edge of the city. Evan looked at Lena, standing like she had always belonged, and wondered what she would reveal next. Something in him knew the world would not stay quiet for long. And for the first time in years, he did not feel alone. Evan had begun to realize that Lena was not an ordinary girl. Every day she moved through the house with calm certainty, touching machines that should have been dead for decades and having them respond as if alive. He had seen her make old systems sing with power again. He had seen her sense danger before it arrived, and now the truth was beginning to settle in his mind like a shadow he could not ignore. Lena was part of something bigger, something he did not understand yet. He tried to ask her questions, but each time he did, she looked at him with wide, careful eyes and typed only short answers. Not safe. Do not ask. Evan respected that, but the silence left him uneasy. He felt that she carried secrets too heavy for words, secrets that could change everything. One night, as the city floated quietly beneath the stars, Evan found a folder that had fallen from one of the old cabinets Lena had opened. It contained photos of children, all with faint, strange markings on their wrists, like the ones he had seen on Lena. His heart sank. The children looked serious, almost trained, even in play. Notes were scribbled in the margins in a language he recognized from old human archives, codes that spoke of experiments, of control, of silence. When he asked Lena about it the next day, she froze. Her small fingers trembled as she typed, "Not mine. Leave it." Evan looked at her, trying to understand. But Lena would not give him more. Instead, she took his hand, guiding him away from the folder and leading him to the living room. There she stood silently, eyes fixed on the wall where old circuits shimmered faintly. It was as if the house itself leaned toward her, waiting. It was then that Evan realized something. Lena was not just deaf. She had been trained. She had survived something that no one else could survive, something dangerous. The markings, the skills, the way machines obeyed her, they were all part of that. Days later, the situation grew more tense. Drones passed closer to the house, red lights scanning. Evan and Lena could hear them coming even when the hum of the city was quiet. She moved like a shadow, silent and alert, her hands hovering over the consoles that now lined the walls. Evan felt both awe and fear. He did not know what kind of enemies they were or what they were searching for, but he knew it was connected to her. One evening, a message arrived through an old communication line Evan had repaired. It was fragmented, but the meaning was clear. Silent key. Must not fall. Humans awake. The voice was distorted, almost mechanical, but it carried urgency. Evan looked at Lena, who simply nodded. She typed, "They want me." Evan's stomach tightened. He had thought he was only helping her, giving her a place to live. Now he realized they were both in danger. Lena was not just a housekeeper. She was a key. A weapon? Perhaps. A survivor? Certainly. And the forces chasing her were not gentle. The next day, Evan tried to prepare the house for defense. He moved machinery into strategic positions and created barricades near the doors. Lena watched quietly, sometimes adjusting a panel here or a wire there. Every movement she made was precise, deliberate, almost ritualistic. He noticed again the faint lines on her arms, and he wondered what they meant. How much had she endured? How much had she lost to reach this point? That night, the first attack came. Not a large force, just a single group of alien soldiers moving through the shadows, their weapons silent. Evan saw them through a crack in the door. Lena raised her hands, palms open toward the nearest console. Lights flickered across the room, and a low hum filled the air. The soldiers froze. Their weapons failed to fire. Systems they relied on shut down. Evan gasped. "Lena, what?" She typed quickly. "They listened to me." Her calmness under pressure was terrifying and comforting all at once. Evan realized that whatever power she had learned to control it perfectly. She did not panic. She did not fight for revenge. She acted with precision, with purpose. The intruders retreated, confused and frustrated, leaving Evan shaken. After the attack, Evan tried to understand more. He followed her as she moved through the house, touching panels and wires, feeling currents he could not see. She paused at one wall and pressed her hand against it. The old system hummed, responding to her as if it had always waited for her touch. "Why do they follow you?" Evan asked, finally finding words he had not said out loud before. She typed, "Because I am one of them." One of them. He had to ask, even though he feared the answer.
Who? What? She shook her head.
Do not ask. Evan wanted to push further, but he could not. There was something dangerous in her silence, something that told him that if he pressed, they would both suffer. Days passed. The city became uneasy. Evan noticed humans whispering in corners, looking at him and his house with new eyes. Some were afraid, some curious. But Lena did not care. She moved through the house, repairing, adjusting, watching. She had a focus that made Evan feel both small and fortunate to be near her. One evening, Evan found an old device buried under layers of dust. It was a communication terminal from the war years. He tried to power it on, but it had been dead for decades. Lena watched. Then she touched the screen. Wow! Sparks flew, circuits realigned themselves, and the device blinked to life. Messages appeared, old human archives, warnings, plans. She could read them instantly, as if the knowledge flowed into her mind. Evan was speechless. You know all this?" She typed. "I remember." Evan's heart sank. She did not just fix things. She remembered things. Things humans had forgotten. Secrets humans had buried. And now they were awake again. The next night, Evan tried to sleep. He could not. His thoughts raced. The world outside seemed heavier, darker. Forces he could not see were moving. Lena had sensed them before he had. And now, he realized, the danger would only grow. A soft tap on the window woke him. He saw Lena standing outside, looking up at the stars. Her figure was calm, small, but full of quiet strength. Evan joined her, feeling the hum of the house beneath his feet, feeling the weight of what was coming. "We need to be ready," he said softly. She typed, "Already ready." Evan understood. Lena had been ready long before he accepted her into his home. She had survived horrors he could not imagine, learned things humans had lost, and now moved through the city with a grace and power he could barely comprehend. And he understood another truth, one that frightened him more than anything else. This quiet girl, this deaf housekeeper, was no ordinary human. She carried the memory of humanity's past, the strength of its lost knowledge, and the power to awaken things long thought gone. The sun rose over the city, pale and distant, casting long shadows through the thin streets. Evan looked at Lena, standing in the early light, and wondered what she would do next. She did not need him, and yet she allowed him to be near. He realized that trust and courage were two things humans had almost forgotten. And for the first time, Evan felt the weight of responsibility settle over him. He was not just a lonely man with a quiet house anymore. He was a guardian, a companion, and perhaps the only person who could help Lena face the dangers that were coming. That night, as the city hummed softly beneath the stars, Evan watched Lena move through the rooms, her small hands tracing circuits and wires. Machines obeyed her, lights flickered in patterns only she could command, and the house itself seemed alive. Evan realized he had accepted more than a housekeeper. He had accepted the return of human strength, hidden in a quiet girl who spoke without words. And somewhere in the shadows beyond the city, eyes watched. Forces that remembered the old war, that remembered the humans, were moving. But Lena, small and silent, was already one step ahead. Evan could only follow, hoping he would be enough. The days that followed were tense. Every knock on the door, every passing drone, made Evan jump. Lena remained calm, adjusting machines, teaching him to feel currents and energy flows he had never noticed. He learned to watch, to wait, and to trust her instincts. And slowly, Evan began to see the truth. Lena was not just a survivor. She was a bridge to something humans had lost. She was part of a plan he could barely understand. And the longer he stayed by her side, the more he realized that this quiet, deaf girl was not the one who needed saving. The city, the humans, and perhaps even the universe might need her instead. As the sun set, painting the city in gold and shadow, Evan looked at Lena. Her eyes were calm, her hands steady, her presence powerful. He understood then that the quietest people sometimes carried the loudest truths, and the smallest actions could awaken worlds. And Evan knew one thing with certainty. The story of their lives had only just begun, and the danger, the secrets, and the truths that Lena carried would not wait for anyone to be ready. They had to face it together. The city did not sleep anymore. Evan felt it the moment he stepped outside with Lena. The air was tight, heavy with watching eyes and quiet machines. Drones passed higher now, slower, as if searching for something they already knew was there. People spoke less. Doors closed faster. Evan and Lena moved through the lower streets, away from the bright levels where aliens ruled openly. Down below, old tunnels connected forgotten living spaces where humans stayed together for safety. Evan had avoided these places for years. He did not want reminders of what humans had lost. But Lena walked without fear, her steps calm, her eyes alert. They reached a hidden entrance marked by faded human signs. Evan knocked in a pattern he'd barely remembered from old days. The door opened just enough for a pair of eyes to see them. "Human?" a voice asked. "Yes," Evan replied. The door opened wider. Inside, dim lights revealed tired faces. Men and women looked at Lena with curiosity and caution. Children watched silently from behind walls. A woman named Mara stepped forward. Her hair was gray, her hands rough from work. "We do not take strangers," she said. Lena stepped forward and bowed slightly. She raised her hands and signed slowly. Evan translated as best he could. "She says she can help." "Power. Water. Heat." Mara laughed bitterly. "We have heard promises before." Lena did not argue. She walked past them to a broken generator in the corner. She placed her hands on it, closed her eyes, and stayed still. The generator shook once, then hummed. Lights brightened across the room. Warm air flowed from vents that had been dead for years. Silence filled the space. then whispers. She fixed it, someone said. Mara stared at Lena. What are you? Lena typed on her device and showed the screen. Human. The tunnels became their shelter. Lena worked quietly, restoring old systems, teaching humans how to keep them running. She never acted like a leader, but people followed her movements, trusted her hands. Evan watched as hope returned in small ways. Warm rooms, clean water, working lights. But with every system Lena woke, something else stirred. Evan felt it. The city above reacted. Patrols increased. Signals crossed the air like sharp threads. Lena sensed it too. She paused more often now, her body tense, her eyes distant. One night, Evan found her standing alone at the edge of the tunnels, hands pressed against the metal wall. They are close, he said. She nodded. She typed slowly. They follow human systems. Old ones. Evan swallowed. Then stop, please. She turned to him. Her eyes were gentle but firm. She typed, If I stop, humans go dark again. Evan had no answer. Officer Kale appeared 2 days later, alone and unarmed. She walked into the tunnels without announcing herself. Humans reached for tools and weapons, but she raised her hands calmly. I am not here to arrest anyone, she said. I am here to warn you. Evan stepped forward. Warn us about what? Kale looked at Lena. About her. Lena met Kale's gaze without fear. The council knows, Kale continued. They know a silent key is active. They believe it is a weapon. Evan felt cold spread through his chest. It is not, Kale added quietly, but they will not listen. They will come. Kale nodded. Soon and in force. That night, the tunnels buzzed with fear. Humans argued, packed belongings, planned escapes that would not work. Evan watched Lena sit among them, calm, listening with her eyes. He knelt beside her. We can leave. Run, father. She shook her head. She typed, Running does not end it. Evan understood then. She had run before. Many times, and it had never stopped them. The attack came at dawn. The ground shook as armored units sealed the tunnel exits. Red light filled the halls. Human screams echoed. Evan grabbed Lena's hand. Stay with me. She squeezed back once, then gently pulled away. She stepped forward, toward the soldiers. Evan shouted, but she did not turn. She raised her hands, palms open, and the machines around her reacted violently. Lights burst. Weapons failed. The air vibrated with power. For a moment, it worked. Soldiers fell back, confused, afraid. Then heavier machines arrived. Older tech, human-based tech, twisted and controlled. Lena staggered. She cried out silently, pain flashing across her face. Evan ran to her, but strong hands grabbed him and threw him aside. No, he shouted. Lena looked at him once. Her eyes were full of apology. She typed quickly and pushed the device into his hand. Protect them. Then she stepped forward again, drawing all attention to herself. The soldiers surrounded her. Energy restraints snapped into place around her arms. The systems she controlled went dark, one by one. Evan struggled, but he was held down. He watched as Lena was taken away, silent and small between towering figures. The tunnels fell quiet. Humans cried openly now. Power flickered but stayed on just barely. Officer Kale stood beside Evan. Her face was pale. I tried, she said. Evan clenched his fists. Where are they taking her? Cale hesitated. An orbital station. Old. Ah.
Human built. Evan stood up slowly.
His body shook, but his mind was clear. Then that is where I am going, he said. Cale studied him. You will die. Evan looked at the humans around him, at the children sleeping under working lights, at the warmth Lena had given them. Then I will not die alone, he replied. That night, Evan began to plan. Humans who had hidden for years stepped forward. They were not soldiers. They were workers, engineers, survivors. But they remembered how to resist. Above them, Lena sat in silence, bound by machines that did not understand her. She felt the station around her, old and broken, waiting. She closed her eyes. She listened without sound. And the station listened back. Cold metal surrounded Lena. The restraints around her arms pressed tight, sending dull pain through her body. She sat alone in a white room inside the orbital station, far above the city. The station was old, very old. She could feel it even without sound. Its walls carried memory, like a tired mind that had waited too long to wake. Lights flickered softly. Machines whispered through energy, not noise. Lena closed her eyes and breathed slowly. She did not panic. Panic wasted strength. Outside her room, alien officers argued. Their voices were sharp and impatient. They wanted answers. They wanted control. They believed Lena was a weapon they could turn on and off. They were wrong. Lena placed her fingers lightly against the restraint. She did not pull. She listened with her body. The metal spoke to her through vibration and flow. It remembered human hands. It remembered purpose. The restraint loosened just a little, not enough to escape, enough to wait. Far below, Evan stood in a dark cargo bay with other humans. The ship they had gathered was old and patched together from scrap. It was not made for battle. It was made to move things quietly, unnoticed. Evan checked the engine one last time. His hand steadied despite the fear twisting inside him. He saw Lena's device in his pocket. The words she had typed before being taken still burned in his mind. Protect them. I am coming, he whispered to the empty bay. Around him, humans prepared. Mara was there, her gray hair tied back tight. Young men and women checked tools, not weapons. They did not have real weapons. They had knowledge, stubborn will, and the memory of being pushed aside. Officer Cale stood near the ramp, watching them. Watching them. The station is guarded, she said. You will not get close without being seen. Evan nodded. Then they will see us. The ship lifted off quietly, slipping into space like a shadow. As they traveled, Evan felt fear rise, then settle into something stronger. Resolve. Lena had given them light. Warmth. Hope. He would not let that end in silence. On the station, Lena was moved to a larger chamber. The floor was marked with old human symbols, faded but still alive. Machines surrounded her, their shapes familiar and painful to remember. These were not alien designs. These were human. A tall alien commander stepped forward. His eyes were dark and cold. Activate it, he said slowly. The silent key. Lena looked at him calmly. She raised her wrist and typed on her device. It is not a weapon. The commander sneered. We decide what it is. They forced her hands onto the central console. The station shuddered. Lights across the chamber flared bright blue. Lena cried out silently as energy rushed through her, not hurting, but overwhelming. Memories flooded back. Training rooms, cold voices, children standing in lines, learning to feel machines instead of hearing them. Learning to obey. No, she would not obey. She focused on one thought. Choice. The station responded. Systems long asleep woke gently, not violently. Signals spread outward, not as commands, but as invitations. Evan's ship felt it first. The console lit up on its own. Old human symbols glowed softly. The engine steadied, stronger than before.
What is happening? Someone asked.
She's calling us. Across the city and beyond, other human systems stirred. Power grids stabilized. Old satellites adjusted their paths. Ships that had not moved in years felt new strength. Humans everywhere felt something change, like a quiet hand on their back, urging them to stand. On the station, alarms screamed. The alien commanders shouted orders, but their machines hesitated. Human-based systems no longer responded to alien commands. They waited. Lena's restraints fell away. She collapsed to her knees, breathing hard. The energy drained her, but she smiled faintly. She had not activated a weapon. She had opened a door. The chamber doors burst open. Evan and the others rushed in, stunned by the sight. Lena looked small against the glowing machines, but her presence filled the room. Evan ran to her side and knelt. Lena. She looked up at him, tired but alive. She typed with shaking fingers.
You came, he nodded, unable to speak.
Alien soldiers rushed forward, but stopped suddenly. Their weapons powered down. Human systems around the chamber locked them in place without violence, without harm. The commander stepped back, fear in his eyes. What have you done? Lena stood slowly, supported by Evan. She typed and turned the screen toward him, then toward the others. It gives humans choice, nothing more. Kale entered behind them, her eyes wide. The council is losing control, she said softly. Across every sector, the commander's voice broke. You cannot let this happen. Lena met his gaze. Her eyes were gentle. She typed, We were quiet too long. The station's systems dimmed to a calm glow. No explosions, no destruction, just balance returning where control had been forced. Evan helped Lena sit down. She leaned against him, weak but peaceful. Outside the chamber, humans began to cheer, though many did not fully understand why. They only knew things felt different. Ships docked freely, doors opened, power flowed evenly. Alien control systems failed without panic, without chaos. Later, Evan sat beside Lena in a medical bay. She rested, eyes closed. Her breathing was slow. A human medic checked her readings and smiled. She'll recover, he said, but she needs rest. Evan nodded. He took her hand gently. Kale stood near the window, watching space. She changed everything, she said. Evan shook his head. She reminded us who we are. Lena opened her eyes slightly. She typed with effort. Humans choose together, not alone. Evan smiled through tears. You did good. The station began its descent toward a neutral orbit. It would no longer be a prison. It would become a place of meeting, of rebuilding. Far below, the city lights changed. They were warmer now. Softer. Humans stepped into streets without fear. Aliens watched, uncertain, but no longer in full control. Lena slept, her hand still in Evan's. For the first time since she was a child, no one was hunting her. No one was forcing her to be silent. Evan looked out at the stars. The universe felt wide again. Dangerous, yes, but also full of possibility. He had accepted a deaf girl as a housekeeper to repay a debt. Instead, he had witnessed the quiet return of human strength. And the story was not over yet. Evan sat beside Lena as the first light of a new day filled the station's observation deck. Her small hand rested in his, fingers trembling slightly from the long strain she had carried. The energy she had released, the system she had awakened, had changed more than just this station. Humans across cities, planets, and ships had felt it. They were no longer silent. They were no longer ignored. Outside the window, the stars stretched endlessly, but the darkness felt different now. There was hope in it. The stations, satellites, and ships that had once waited quietly in orbit now pulsed with life. Lena had reminded humans of something they had lost: their own power, their own will, their own choice. Evan remembered the first day he had let her into his home. He had thought he was only repaying a debt. He had not known what he was accepting. A quiet, deaf girl who had seemed fragile had become the key to awakening an entire species. The humans in the station began to move cautiously. They repaired systems, shared stories, and checked communications. They were no longer just survivors. They were connected. Again. A network of people, machines, and knowledge that had waited for centuries now stirred. Lena stirred slightly and looked up at Evan. She typed slowly, "I feel them." Evan looked at her, puzzled. "Oh, humans?" She typed, "Everywhere." "They are waking." Evan smiled softly. He understood now her power was not in control or destruction. It was in connection, in bringing humans together when they had been scattered and afraid. She had not created a weapon. She had created unity. Across the city, humans began to gather openly. They repaired homes, powered old machines, and shared knowledge. The children played in streets that had been empty for years. Parents talked to each other again. Humans looked at one another as equals, not weak, not defeated. They were alive. Even aliens watched, uncertain. They had never expected this. They had assumed that humans were small, quiet, and easily controlled. But Lena had shown them they were neither. She had shown them that humans, even those who had been silenced, could rise together. Evan stood beside Lena, feeling the warmth of her hand. "They're safe," he whispered. "All of them." She nodded slowly. She typed, "Not yet. Always watch." Her words reminded him that vigilance was necessary, but it also carried a promise. She would guide them, and they would not fall into fear again. As the station hummed softly with renewed energy, Evan looked around. Humans were repairing old ships, rerouting power, and opening communication lines. Systems that had been lost for decades came alive under their hands, and in the center of it all, Lena rested, small and fragile in appearance, but strong beyond measure in her spirit and presence. Officer Kale approached them quietly. "The council is changing," she said. "They cannot control humans anymore. They will have to negotiate. They will have to listen." He had seen it already. The humans had awakened. They were no longer just passengers in their own lives. A small group of children approached Lena. They had never met her before. They looked at her with curiosity and respect. Lena smiled faintly and signed slowly, showing them how to feel energy in machines, how to sense currents, how to understand systems without fear. They followed her instructions eagerly. Evan watched them, amazed. A deaf girl teaching children the language of machines and energy, creating confidence where there had been only fear. He realized that her impact would last for generations. Outside, the city transformed further. Lights in homes stayed on. Shops reopened. People ventured outside without hesitation. Where there had once been silence, there was now sound, not loud or violent, but full of life. Humans spoke with each other, shared meals, helped each other repair damage left by decades of neglect. Evan looked at Lena. "You've done this," he said. "You've brought them back," she typed. "They did it themselves. I only showed the way." Evan smiled softly. That was Lena. Always humble, always patient, always quiet. She did not need applause. She did not need recognition. She only needed to act, and her actions spoke louder than words ever could. The station began to stabilize in orbit. Humans could now travel freely between cities and planets without fear of being silenced. Communication networks hummed with energy. Ships that had been abandoned took flight again. Evan and Lena watched quietly as humans walked outside the station, looking up at the stars with eyes full of wonder. They were not afraid. They were connected. They were alive. Finally, Evan let out a long breath. The fear, tension, and uncertainty that had hung over him for so long began to fade. He looked at Lena and realized something he had known all along, but had only now understood fully. Accepting a deaf girl as a housekeeper had not repaid a debt. It had changed the course of humanity. He held her hand gently. "Thank you," he whispered. Lena typed slowly. "You did not need to." And Evan knew that was true. She did not need anyone to save her. She had survived, endured, and acted with courage beyond measure. He had only walked beside her, learning, witnessing, and helping when he could. The sun began to rise across the distant horizon of space, spilling light into the station. Evan felt the warmth on his face. Lena sat quietly beside him, her small hand still in his, her presence steady and calm. Humans were waking, not with violence, but with unity. Lena had shown them strength, not in power, but in courage, in connection, and in compassion. Evan realized that he had once lived in loneliness and fear. Now he lived in hope and purpose, not because he had changed the world, but because he had been brave enough to accept someone who was extraordinary in the quietest way. And Lena, small, silent, and deaf, had changed everything. Evan smiled as he looked at the stars. The universe was wide and full of possibility. Humans were no longer afraid to step into it. Lena leaned against him slightly. She was tired, but her eyes held a calm pride. She typed one last message on her device. "We are awake." Evan squeezed her hand gently.
Yes.
"We are." Outside, the stars continued to shine, and for the first time in many generations, humanity looked up at them without fear. They were no longer alone. They were strong. And the quiet girl who had been a housekeeper, who had been accepted out of debt and kindness, was at the center of it all. Her courage had reminded humanity of what it could be. Evan and Lena watched the new day rise together, knowing that the future, uncertain and vast, now belonged to those who chose to be awake, aware, and united. The galaxy waited, and humanity, guided by quiet strength, was ready.